This recording was produced by Oregon Trail Baptist Church. If you'd like to get more recordings, or to leave your feedback, please visit us at www.otbchurch.com or write us at P.O. Box 298, Guernsey, Wyoming 82214. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope that today's recording will not just challenge your thinking, but will transform your life.
Today we were on Theology of Everyday Life, Lesson 3, Friendship, Rebuke, and the Balance. And the text for this morning is Proverbs 27. So if you want to turn there in your Bibles. Proverbs chapter 27. I do have handouts, yes. They are new ones. Do you want the latest edition, hot off the press? Do you want one with a good staple or a bad staple? Here, Leroy. There you go. All right. Now, Proverbs chapter 27 is a chapter dealing with a lot of different personal relationships in life. I said wife because my brain was jumping ahead. It talks about husbands and wives. It talks about friends. It talks about various relationships within life. Now we're going to look specifically at the relationship of friendship, but Proverbs 27 verses 5 to 9 will be our key text for this morning. Now before we get into it, remember we're looking at these concepts, these very practical things in Scripture like friendship, understanding that we have societal pressures on us that impact our view of friendship. We have family pressures, we even have church pressures, but we have different pressures in life, different influences in our life that shape our view of these things. But not always is that view correct. And if you remember the quote, which I haven't included in the lessons, if I can get it right now, what is normal seems to be right. But it's not always right, is it? I didn't even get the quote right. Maybe I should include it here a few times in the lesson. We perceive as normal. We tend to believe this is right. Well, maybe it's not. And so we need the Bible to filter through that for us. So let's look at Proverbs 27, 5 through 9. Open rebuke is better than secret love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. The full soul loatheth an honeycomb, but to the hungry soul every bitter thing is sweet. As a bird that wandereth from his nest, so is a man that wandereth from his place. Ointment and perfume rejoice the heart, but the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. I like the quote here by, I don't even know who David Dockery is, I just like what he said. Sometimes true love may be hidden in a rebuke, just as hatred may be hidden in a kiss. There is no love where there is no fidelity to one's wife and friends. True friends can improve each other's character, but nagging only irritates. So page 2 here, friends are obligated to rebuke each other. Rebuke is an active form of love. Oh, my wife has the quote that I botched from a previous lesson. Would you like to read it?
What is common seems normal, and what's normal seems to be right.
What is common seems to be normal, and what is normal seems to be right. Back to 1A. Thank you. You needed that about 30 seconds ago. I see. Rebuke is an active form of love. Proverbs 3:12. For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as a father the son in whom he delighteth. Now, what is that telling us about God and his love? He cares about us. God, did you have something, Laquita? Oh, maybe that was him doing something. Okay. God corrects those he loves. Does that mean everybody who... Well, let me ask this question. Who does God love?
Everyone.
Okay, God loves the world, does he not? And yet, is this talking about the world? Okay, so in what sense is it talking about God's love? Because it's not necessarily talking about the whole world. He loves us enough to correct us when we're not doing right. Now, God established the world. And just like all the laws of nature, there are laws of life that God has established. And so, we've talked about you reap what you sow. And so sometimes we look at, God is chastising me because of all my wicked things I've done. Well, that could be, but it could be just the laws that God has established of you're reaping what you sowed. But I see here more an active correction that God gets involved in our lives as believers because he delights in us. Ephesians 4:15, Paul says to the Ephesians, "But speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ." As I was thinking about this, I compared the active love that we should have to the active faith we should have. Proverbs 27 here talks about a love that produces action, where we actually will rebuke and correct one another. And a friend's love is shown through his action or rebuke specifically. In James 2, we have a faith that produces works, and a believer's faith is shown by his works. And then in that chapter, 2 examples are given, that of Abraham and that of Rahab. So, any comments or questions? Yeah.
Another passage in Hebrews 12, where it says in verse 6, "For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth."
Hebrews 12, verse 6. Good. Yeah, that's another. That may be in the lesson somewhere too. I'm not sure. This lesson ended up just packed with verses, so... Well, then maybe it's not there. Hebrews 12:6, is that what it was? Okay, good. Any other comments, questions before we... All right, rebuke is a valuable form of teaching. Now, we have the verse later in this chapter, "Iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend." Now, there's a play on words in this verse that maybe we don't catch. The face of a sword or the edge of a sword is called its face. And so it takes a hard face of a sword to sharpen another hard face of another sword. And a face of a human sharpens the face of another human. The faces are against each other. They're willing to be sharp and correct one another as needed. So kind of a play on words, but a very vivid imagery that we understand. Iron sharpens iron, so the man sharpens the countenance of his friend. But don't forget, iron, it may sharpen iron, but what will iron also do to iron? It can dull it too. If it's not done right, it'll make the sword horribly dull. I think that harkens to the fact that when we correct one another, there has to be an attitude of love and of patience and of compassion, and we better be led of the Spirit and not just angry in our own flesh because of the failures and weakness. So back to rebuke is a valuable form of teaching. 1 at the top of page 3. Those who heed rebuke are prudent and wise. Several Proverbs talk about this. Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Now the irony here is the scorner is the one who thinks he has everything all together, and the wise man is the one you would think would be making the wise decisions. Right? Wise people make wise decisions. However, the wise man at times needs correction. And it's the wise man who receives it and incorporates it and applies it. It's the scorner, the know-it-all, who doesn't. Proverbs, comments, questions? Proverbs 15:5. A fool despiseth his father's instruction, but he that regardeth reproof is prudent. Proverbs 17:10. A reproof entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into a fool. Now, boy, don't you see that verse played out? People are on the hamster wheel of sin, going around, making the same mistakes over and over and over again. The 100 stripes, but it doesn't get into their head. Somehow this time is going to be different. Somehow it's going to change. Somehow it's not going to. And it just goes round and round. And yet, those people in their lives are trying to tell them, look, you got to stop this. You got to stay away from there. They don't listen to that. And those revolutions on the hamster wheel of sin keep beating them over the head. And it's quite a sad thing. Comments, questions? I think the heat got everybody tired today. All right, Psalm 141:5. Let the righteous smite me, it shall be a kindness. Let him reprove me, it shall be an excellent oil, which shall not break my head, for yet my prayer also shall be in their calamities. What's the psalmist talking about here? Let the righteous smite me, and it shall be a kindness. It's much better to have a friend tell you what you're doing wrong than an enemy. Let me jump on that a minute, though. Sometimes our enemies can tell us, if we take and listen to what our enemies have to say and take it to heart, sometimes that can be the best reproof we get. Because they don't care. And sometimes it's going to be wrong. But sometimes our friends may be picking their battles of what to work on in our life, and our friends or our enemies don't care. They're just going to lambaste us with everything. And when they do that, we can suddenly see a little window in how people perceive us. Now, coming from an enemy, it's going to be tainted. It's going to be exaggerated. I understand that. But maybe our best response would be to take what is said to the Lord and say, Lord, is this true in my life? Is there something lacking here? That's an interesting... Our enemies see someone as an enemy who actually they are functioning as a friend. How often do children feel like their parents are their enemy and against them? Every time they're corrected. Yeah, isn't that the truth? And yet, their parents are really pulling for them, and they want the best for them. Proverbs, yeah.
Which brings out a point, and that is, if they're truly a friend, they are wanting you to get better.
Right.
They're not wanting to destroy you. And on any kind of discipline, rebuke, whatever, it ought to be for bring about restoration or make the person stronger and better, not destroy them.
That is a correction. If the motive behind correction is revenge and to restore what was broken of mine, it's not the same as having, okay, I want this person to grow through this. Yes, they broke my vase. Yes, they did what yes, they did this and that, and now I'm suffering loss because of it. But that's not the reason for the correction. The correction is to be because I want you to learn how to respond properly. Yesterday was one of those moments for me with one of my children. So they were doing the plane rides here, and one of my children decided, long story short, but you can only have 3 passengers in each plane. each plane seated 4, and with a pilot, that means 3. Well, I got 3 kids. And I was a little leery about sending 3 kids in a plane with a poor pilot. And if one of them just goes crazy and berserk and gets scared, poor pilot. So it worked out that actually Freedom was going with somebody she knew. So one of the kids went with Freedom, and the other 2 came with me. Well, I had the 2 boys, and one of the boys did not want, he really wanted to go with Freedom. And he let that just ruin his plane ride. He was sitting down. We got stuck in a holding pattern because a bunch of C-130s were coming in. So we went around Grey Rocks, I think, 3 times in this holding pattern. They both ended up falling asleep before it was done. But I could not do anything to get my son to enjoy the ride because he was just fixed on having a bad attitude because he didn't get to ride with his friend. And so when he got home, he got a little correction for that. And of course, by that point, he was hot, he was tired. As a dad, you're kind of irritated because like you went out of the way, made this extra effort for something they would enjoy, and they let some little thing ruin it. But the fact that I was irritated was not a good reason to get after him. It's because he needs to learn a lesson about, well, I don't always get my way, and I can't let that be the breaking point issue of everything in life. I mean, this is the first time he's ever got to fly in a small plane, and it was just ruined for him. So maybe next year will be better. Yeah. Or maybe Mom will be there so we can split the family between 2 different planes. But oh, come on. So anyway, the point is, the correction there, I wanted to produce in my son a lifelong attitude of learning to roll with the punches of life, and that you don't always get everything you want, but you need to enjoy the things that you do have. And he probably knows I'm talking about him. This won't. I know.
It's amazing what little things will get done.
Yep. Hence the reason Satan can throw something our way, and he just, Satan just has to stop by in the morning, throw us one thing, and then he can move to the next house, because most of us, we latch onto that one thing and it ruins our entire day. And so we have to be very careful to hold up the shield of faith and quench those fiery darts. Forgive what? Yeah, we are to forgive our enemies. So what are you pulling out there, Leroy?
That's what Jesus said.
Right, we're to forgive our enemies, yeah?
That's what he said.
Uh-huh.
When he told us.
Right. Yeah, we are to forgive our enemies. We're talking about here, though, people who are against us, and yes, we may have forgiven them, but they're still going to say things against us.
What I mean.
Yep. So we can forgive anything they say that.
And then go against
Yeah.
us.
So Proverbs 27:5 especially points to the need of communication and interaction among people. Few things are worse than being ignored, and the studied avoidance of honest contact destroy any relationship. Today we're living in the social media age where I can put something on Facebook and people all over the United States know about it like that. And then they can reshare it and it may go around. But that's only a very surface level of friendship. And to have a level of friendship where you can actually and honestly rebuke people, it cannot be at that shallow level. It's got to be deeper. Now, in context with that, though, on the social media level, which I know that some of us don't use it all, that's fine. But on that social media level, when somebody's posting on social media something that's inappropriate, it is fully appropriate for you to say, Do you realize what you posted there? This video you shared, did you realize it had cussing? This rant that you had, was that good? And I've had individuals say, keep me accountable on what I say on Facebook, which is sometimes easier said than done because you get so many things on it's like I don't read everybody's. I just scroll through. But the point is, you can correct on that level. But I learned in college, sometimes when you're living in dormitories and close quarters with people, you're able to see things in their life that they can't see. Maybe it's pride, and they don't see the pride in their own life. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean you are all of a sudden equipped to go up and say, you got pride in your life, you need to deal with it. Because you may not have a relationship with that person, and you doing that, it may make things worse. Leroy, I wasn't talking about you. I just used you as a physical. You're a college student, all right? So, and I learned that you have to let the Lord lead in the rebuke and the correction. Otherwise, you just become somebody who's always correcting everybody, and you just become known as that, and it's not a healthy thing. Comments, questions before we keep moving here?
So Facebook is saying your wrong thing, so.
Well, it depends on who shares it on Facebook. Facebook, it allows anybody to share anything they want. And so people share inappropriate things, and when they do that, they're either off my friend list or they're unfollowed. Or, honestly, Facebook, good people share good things. But that's nothing new, because if you go down to the bar and the taverns, people are going to be sharing news, and they're going to be talking about things. But there's a total difference going to the bar and tavern and what people are talking about in church.
Yeah, it's true.
You see the difference? So who you are around and who you friend on Facebook or whatever will impact the type of things you hear. Yeah.
Oftentimes on social media, though, we've got choices. If you want to correct somebody, I would personally recommend that you do it and sending them a private message instead of doing it just as another post or down there.
That is a very good point of wisdom. So for those of you who don't know Facebook, when they post a public message, everybody can see it. But you can send a private message where only the person or persons you're sending it to, kind of like an email letter, they can see it. That is how I generally respond. If somebody says something that is inappropriate or posts something, instead of jumping on and just replying to that, I'll send them a private message. It does several things. One is it keeps the rebuke between me and that person. The other thing is, if I send it in a reply that other people can read, I've seen it happen over and over again. Then you'll get this battle between people of one person, well, that's okay. No, that's not. And then there's this whole debate back and forth, and you can erase most of that by most people not seeing your rebuke. And very practical, good point. Yeah.
I would like to look at verse 5, where rebuke is secret love and dealing with communication, interaction, over being ignored.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole idea of as a friend rebuking.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to be careful where, even if it's an open rebuke, I guess I need to know more about what open rebuke means. But we've had an issue this summer with one having fault with somebody else or open rebuke, which was in front of everybody, where anybody walking by could hear.
Right.
Instead of making that, okay, if I did something wrong, fine, but it needs to be done in a private manner.
I think
Because that wasn't for letting ears, and it gave the presence of conflict that really
wasn't there and wasn't needed. I didn't think of that aspect, to be quite honest, so I didn't really dig into those words open rebuke. However, hold on, hold this thought a sec. I would jump to the New Testament, and I'd use the phrase, the sphere of offense determines the sphere of confession or reproof. So if there is a rebuke to take place, it's much better to do it in private and not make a show of it. However, if it was a big public rebuke in front of all, or offense in front of all the camp staff, it's probably something that might need dealt with public, but I'd still deal with it privately with that person first, and then bring them into the public sphere for the confession. Oh, exactly. Yeah, and that hurts everybody. Kathy.
Verse 5, where they're saying, where it's very clearly says open rebuke is better than secret love. The context is we're talking about a friendship,
Yeah.
or that relationship with a one-on-one, type relationship. So I think it's really saying that if you're the friend of a person and you see your friend in trouble and you choose not to say something to them, that's secret love.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of coming to them,
Yeah.
Open rebuke simply in this case means you go to them first instead of keeping it secret, hidden.
If they can't wait and they have to do it in public, I would question the motive of the rebuke. Was the rebuke because it inconvenienced? And I'm glad I don't know any details of the situation, but is the rebuke because it inconvenienced them? Good morning, Dory. Here you go. Or is it a rebuke because actually they want that person to improve? Often we can shift. We want that person to improve so that the rest of camp or whatever runs smoothly. And it may help a lot of people if that person would improve. But even there, the shift in our motive, it's not actually to develop that person. It's now become to make everybody else's life easier. And so that's not always a good motive. We are on page 3, I believe. Bottom of page 3. Good. We might make it through today's lesson. Number 2, rebuke serves as a life-giving tool. Proverbs 10:17. He is in the way of life that keepeth instruction, but he that refuseth reproof erreth. Harking back to what Kathy was saying, the quote there I think connects into that. Love that is hidden becomes undesirable because it is a dormant love. A love that fails honestly to express itself. They're not deep enough in friendship to correct one another. Proverbs 28:23, he that rebuketh a man afterwards shall find more favor than he that flattereth with the tongue. If I truly care about you, I will encourage you in your strong points, but I will also deal with the areas that are weak, wanting to see them corrected in your life. The people who love you the most are the ones who don't flatter you. They're the ones who encourage you, yes, but also rebuke you in love, caring about you enough to point out your weakness. Treasure friends that occasionally wound you. If you don't receive their correction correctly, they will stop giving it, and you will be the poor. I like that from John Curson. He's got a lot of good comments. I'm going to fly through these next few. I'd really like to get to the next point. Ignoring a problem leads to death. Proverbs 15:10. Correction is grievous unto him that forsaketh the way. He that hateth reproof shall die. Poverty and disgrace come to the person who ignores rebuke, while the person who accepts it finds honor. Proverbs 13:18. Poverty and shame shall be to him that refuseth instruction, but he that regardeth reproof shall be honored. And Yahweh, or God, rebukes those he loves. We already saw that, but Proverbs 3:12, for whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as the Father the Son, in whom he delighteth. in Jesus' version of this proverb, where he kind of quoted it and taught on it in the New Testament, he set forth in a form of admonition, gives us a definition of how such laboring love ought to work. If your brother sins against you, rebuke him, and if he repents, forgive him. That our love is good enough either to forgive or to rebuke or forgive. And that's a very helpful thought. When someone does something wrong to us as a friend, we may not rebuke, but we also may hold bitterness, and we may not forgive, and that's going to ultimately ruin the friendship, and it's going to bring it down, and it's going to be troublesome. Correcting a person's fault is an evidence of love, but failing to correct him shows one's love is withdrawn. And I think there we have again the willingness to rebuke versus the secret love. Oh, I do and I don't want to do this. I'm going to skip the application questions. I'll let you do those later. I want to get... Oh, can it? Let's do the application questions and we'll pick up point 2 next time. Think of a time when you've corrected a friend. Did you view their criticism as helpful or did you feel hurt?
Wow,
I
I can think of time.
Okay, most of the time we feel hurt, don't we? Okay.
Trying to do some help people
Yeah.
in my apartments,
Uh-huh.
and they're rebuking on it.
Yeah.
And I just tell God, it's up to you on them people, because I try.
Right.
So God said it's up to you.
Right. What were you saying, Pastor Driscoll? Oh, okay.
I can add, Hebrews 12 verse 11 says, no chastening for the present seemeth joyous, but nevertheless afterward it yieldeth the peace, the peaceable fruit of righteousness for them that exercise their life. So, yeah, it is hard and hurtful initially, but if you take it and you regard it and you think about it and find out a little bit of truth that might be in there in the midst of everything else that was said, it can be very beneficial.
I'm looking back to the aspect of, as the one being reproved, you can sense the motive of the reprover. In college, it was very formative for me, and there were administrators who my interaction with them was only rebuke. And there came a point in my time in college when I was sitting in the office, they didn't like some things that I had done, or I didn't fit their mold very well, and so they said, we don't care what your side of the story is, this is what we're doing. They wouldn't let me share my side, they wouldn't let me, so they took everything another student had said, and that's what, boom, I got the rebuke. Now, how do you think that felt? I had a verse in my head, a fool answers a matter before it's heard. And that did not help me in the long run. I learned lessons from it, but I learned lessons from negative behavior. And so I seek not to reproduce that with those who I maybe have authority over. However, I had a dorm soup room leader. He was my Greek teacher. He was a very close mentor. And he'd be the type to say, I see this in your life, and it's a weakness. And then a week later, I'd fall in the same area again, and he'd pull me into his office or room and say, why did you do that? And it wasn't, why did you do that? It was, you could tell he had a heart for me. And that impacted me much better than, you did this wrong, we don't care what your side of the story is, we don't care what your reasons were, we don't care, we're not going to listen, even if you've got a case to be presented. Because I knew his heart and because I could sense his heart, the correction was well applied, well taken. Was I perfect? No. But I had a friend who helped me get to where I need to be.
You don't really know what you're doing wrong, and it hurts more than if you actually know you're doing something. You know?
That is...
But if you don't think you're doing anything wrong, or you can't figure out why they're doing it, then
that is also very interesting to hearken back to some of the Wednesday Bible studies. A paradigm is a set of rules we establish and how to be successful within those rules. And I read about this pastor who he broke paradigms in this new church he was in. He moved around some things in the order of service, and that made people upset. He one service decided he wanted to do testimonies, so they passed around a microphone, and somebody who mentally wasn't all there got the microphone and began to rant and rave. And so they got the microphone away, and but the next business meeting or meeting, they had one of the deacons came into the office saying, "Don't you ever do that again." He just broke the rule of paradigm that you keep complete control on the service. So he was breaking rules that he didn't know existed until he broke them. And that is a very hard rebuke, because that's why sometimes as a pastor coming into a church, it's nice to, and it's very hard, but to observe a church first. You know certain things they do and don't do. You can feel them out. Things that aren't right or wrong. I mean, we've been in churches where when you do a potluck, it's A to M brings the main dish, and then everybody else brings a side dish. And then they switch back and forth. But then you do that at other churches, well, here, it wouldn't work here. Okay, it just wouldn't work. So there's things that people do and routines and paradigms, and you can come in and upset all that and just get yourself in a whole mess of trouble when you don't need to get into a mess of trouble. So, any other comments or questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had a couple when we first came to church.
Uh-huh.
They would have us over fairly often. And being a young pastor's wife and then being a couple, we thought it was to build a rapport and friendship. No, it was to rebuke us for things that they wanted changed in the church. And it got to a point where we either dreaded going or we just started using patience, because we were talking about humility. It wasn't for friendship, it was for control. And that same person rebuked us over potluck dinners.
Oh.
There's no luck about it. Why do we call it that? It should be fellowship dinners, It was just like that all the time. As a Christian, there's no luck in it.
Potluck dinners, kettle blessings, a carry-in dinner, everybody. What do you want to call it?
I ate her lunch.
It's all the
The
same
word
thing.
luck was in there. But we learned a lot through that, but it was hurtful. Because the motive wasn't for our best interest, it was for internal.
I read a story recently of a pastor who, every time someone took him out to dinner, it was always because they wanted something. And this is probably common for a lot of pastors. And so, yeah, he went out to dinner with somebody that they had taken him out, and they just chatted and talked, and finally towards the end of the dinner he said, "What do you want?" And the reply was, "Well, I just wanted to get to know you better and get to know who you were." And because it's just so normal that, okay, we take you out to dinner, but we want to, hey, we'd like to see this, or we got something to do. And so that is very helpful. So, well, let's close out there. We'll get into the other questions next week. I guess we'll get a running start. But Father, we thank you for what your word has to say about friendship. And Lord, we don't like rebuke to receive. Most of us don't like to give it. But Lord, would you help us to give rebuke in balance? Would we have the right motive in our giving of rebuke? Would we be able to give it with care and compassion? And Lord, would you make us believers who know how to be friends one with another and how to build friendships outside of the church that we may win people to Christ. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen.